how do you define power in the way you guide people in this book towards power? Because I think power has changed, power has shifted, its meaning has evolved. And I wanted to know what you define as power.
Well, people have this misconception of power. They think it has to do with, CEOs and presidents, and it's kind of ugly and dirty. I have a much different conception of it. It's something that has to do with your daily life. Now, I have the idea that much in our lives we cannot control. You can throw a number out, 95%. You can't control disease. You can't control the people that you meet. It's by chance that you met your wife and you fell in love and you ended up marrying her. You kind of fall into jobs. There's much in life that is way beyond your control, but there's a margin that you can control, right? And it's mostly about your relationships. It has to do with your children, your spouse, your partners, your colleagues at work, your bosses. And the feeling that you have no control over them, that they can do whatever they want, that you have an idea and you want to sell it to them, or you want somebody to stop their annoying behavior and you can't control them, they're completely oblivious, they won't listen to anything you say, is to me the worst feeling for a human being to have, right? We're animals that need that sense of I can influence my environment. I can influence the people around me. And the sense of helplessness is a very, very primal feeling. It's like when you take an animal, I don't know if you have dogs or cats, and you put them on their belly, they feel exposed, they feel terrified, and that's when they attack you. Well, that position is like being on our belly. I can't control my teenage son. He's into drugs. My husband or my wife isn't listening to me. Ugh, my boss is doing, you want the ability to be able to at least defend yourself or to have some influence or power over them. It's a small margin because there's much you can't control, but to the degree that you can have some of that power and then there's one other aspect, probably the most important aspect that I'm forgetting here, is power over yourself, self-mastery, right? Because a lot of the problems that you have in life, you can't really control yourself. You're subject to all these emotions, these moods, these things that grab you, that obsess you, that possess you. Your mind has these recurrent thoughts. You have no self-control, and it drives you crazy. You have a habit you want to get rid of. You take some program, some class, and 3 months later, you're back at it. What is it? So the sense that you can control yourself to a degree, and the sense that you can have some influence over people is power. And the more you have it, the greater the feeling you have, because you can avoid that helplessness that makes all of us kind of crazy.
Yeah, I really love how you grounded that definition of power in self-mastery, because that seems to be where everything else loses control. It's like if we're out of control, then everything seems out of control. And so much of our lust or envy or greed or anger has the ability to distract and derail us completely when there's no self-power.
Right.
And why do you think it is? You mentioned that. Why do you think it is that we all have, and I can relate to this, and I think, when you referred to yourself as someone who struggled and, couldn't figure it out and was surprised by what happened. And, I would say the same, that, I grew up being bullied for being overweight, and I was one of few Indian people in my entire area that I grew up in London.
Where in London?
I was in North London, so majority area of Tottenham and Wood Green, which are not considered South Asian areas generally. And when I look back at that time in my life, I also feel like at one point in my life, was an underdog. And why do you think it is that so many underdogs have such a negative view of power? I feel like so many people today, whether they consider themselves underdogs or not, when we think of words like power or influence, we think of them as negative things. We think of them as being, as you said, like dirty or toxic or plagued. Why is that? And how do you healthily transform your belief around power?
Well, that was sort of what I wrote the book about, but a lot of it comes from our culture, which I think plays often a very negative role in our lives. It teaches us the wrong kinds of lessons. And so back in the days when it was television, now it's whatever you watch in whatever medium, all of the villains in the world were these power-hungry people in black coats with cars with the windows kind of blacked out, and doing all sorts of evil, ugly things. That's what we think of as power. It's like a cultural trope that we've all digested. This kind of Machiavellian character who's out to kind of destroy people. Nobody thinks of power in a positive sense. And it's maddening. It drives me crazy. It's incredibly hypocritical. When self-help books are written and they're trying to say that power or ambition or influence are ugly things, when the writer himself or herself is actually a very powerful person who has influence, who has control, it's awful. It drove me crazy. It's why I wrote the book.